to the home of Scotch whisky. Enjoyed worldwide, Scotch whisky is Scotland's most famous export, and to many, represents the very best of the country. With 2,000 brands sold in over 200 countries, it's the leading international spirit drink, renowned for its quality and distinctiveness. So just what is it that makes Scotch so unique? Malt whisky in Scotland has been distilled for more than 500 years, first by farmers. Soon casks of whisky were being exchanged at market for other goods, and so began, although illegally, production of the world's favourite spirit drink. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that laws of the land officially sanctioned distilling, followed by the invention of the coffee still, allowing continuous distillation, which led to the introduction of grain whisky, a milder, less intense spirit, which when married together with malt whisky, gave a lighter spirit. This new blended whisky extended the drink's appeal to markets across the globe, and so laid down the foundation for Scotch whisky to become the leading international spirit drink. Scotland is home to more than 100 malt and grain distilleries, the greatest concentration of whisky distilleries in the world, and the source of all our famous single malt, single grain, and blended Scotch whisky brands. With 4 main distilling areas, Highlands, Lowlands, Islay, and Speyside, the geography and climate of each region influences the character of the whiskies produced there, resulting in a range of distinctive flavours and aromas to satisfy any palate. Only whisky made and matured in Scotland can be called Scotch whisky. Scotch whisky is the result of craft skills and knowledge passed down from one generation to the next, coupled with the finest raw materials of fresh water, yeast, and barley. First, ripened barley is harvested, soaked in water and left to germinate. Throughout the germination process, heat is generated, so the barley must be turned regularly. Once the barley has started to root, germination is stopped by drying the grain in a kiln. Traditionally, peat, formed over thousands of years from decayed vegetation, was added to the kiln fuel, its smoke imparting a characteristic smoky flavour onto the drying barley and into the finished spirit. Peat is still used for its distinctive flavouring, especially in distilleries on Islay, but in other areas it has sometimes been replaced by smokeless fuels or warm air circulated through the barley. The malted barley, or malt, is now ready for mashing, which releases the sugar from the starch in the barley. The malt is ground into a coarse flour called grist, and then mixed with hot water in a mash tun, a large circular vessel which stirs the mix, getting hotter as more water is in turn added, then drained from the mix. As the grist mixes with the hot water, the starch is naturally converted into sugar, which dissolves to become a hot, sweet liquid known as wort. The wort is cooled, filled into large vessels called washbacks, and yeast added to allow fermentation to take place. The yeast converts the sugar in the wort into low-strength alcohol, known as wash. The wash is now ready for distilling into malt whisky. Malt whisky is distilled in pot stills made from polished copper, which come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Copper is an essential element to the distillation process through the chemical reactions of its surface with the spirit. The varying height and the angle of the lye pipe through which the vapours leave the still have an effect on the flavour of the whisky distilled. Because alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water, once heated, the still enables alcohol vapour to rise up through its neck, condense back to liquid, and be collected for redistilling. This liquid is passed through a second, smaller still, where it is distilled further and drawn off. In general, tall stills produce lighter whisky, as only the lightest alcohol rises to the top, while shorter neck stills allow heavier alcohol to be collected. The spirit flows through a spirit safe, which is under lock and key and government control. The stillman uses all his years of experience to check that only spirit perfect for making Scotch whisky is collected for maturation. Finally, water is added to the newly distilled, colourless, fiery spirit to reduce its strength before it is filled into oak casks and left to mature. By law, Scotch whisky has to remain in oak casks in Scotland for at least 3 years, although the spirit may mature for 8, 10, 12, 15 years, or even longer. During this maturation period, the raw spirit evolves into a smooth, aromatic whisky with many different elements coming together to influence the final flavour. Casks are used, which have previously held bourbon or sherry, which give colour and character to the Scotch whisky. Some casks are also lightly charred on the inside, which helps the interaction between the spirit and the wood. The wood allows the spirit to breathe. The surrounding atmosphere is drawn into the cask while the spirit evaporates at around 2% a year. This evaporation is known as the angel's share. Together, all these elements combine to transform a spirit into a distinctive malt whisky with a character reflective of its local environment. Every distillery produces its own unique malt whisky. However, similarities in local climates mean that every malt has a resemblance to its regional family and can be classified as coming from a specific region of Scotland. Highland malt whiskies are rounded, smooth, robust, and dry in character, with a hint of smokiness or peatiness. Speyside malt whiskies have an elegance and complexity, firm-bodied, with a hint of malty sweetness and a smoky character. Islay malts are some of the heaviest malt whiskies, with the strongest smell and taste, and a distinctive whiff of sea air. And lowland malts reflect the calm, lush countryside of the region and tend to be light, mellow and gentle on the palate, with a lighter, drier taste with no peatiness. Most single malts are combined with complementary grain and other malt whiskies to make blended Scotch whisky brands. Whilst the popularity of malt and aged whiskies is increasing, blended Scotch whisky accounts for more than 90% of sales. Grain whisky is distilled in a coffee still. The smooth spirit is lighter in flavour and aroma than malt whisky, and it is a fully matured whisky in its own right. Grain whisky plays a central role in the foundation of blended Scotch whisky, providing the base on which famous blends are created. Grain whisky distilleries are much larger than malt distilleries, but their product is just as individual. The subtlety of each variety makes them ideal for marrying with single malt whiskies to create a blended whisky. The complex marriage of single malt and single grain whiskies is the responsibility of a master blender. He aims to draw out the best qualities from each of the whiskies and create a blended Scotch whisky which has its own definite and recognisable character. A master blender must develop a nose, an appreciation of the subtleties of aroma and flavour from the extensive range of single Scotch whiskies. He will combine between 15 to 50 single malt and grain whiskies of varying ages to make a single recognisable blend, ensuring that the ingredients of his famous blend are a closely guarded secret. There is no correct proportion between malt and grain whiskies. Every brand is different. The hallmark of a good blended Scotch whisky is its reliability from year to year. He must ensure that the blend is consistent with previous years, so that Scotch drinkers the world over will recognise his blend as the brand they know and love. Scotch whisky may be a drink full of history and tradition, but its enduring success lies in its versatility. You can enjoy Scotch whisky on any occasion, at any venue, and in any way you like. There is no right or wrong way. A drop of water can help bring out the subtle aroma and reveal more character. Just add the amount of water to your taste. Adding ice makes Scotch a refreshing drink. But it's worth remembering, though, that ice does numb your tongue and mask some of the whisky's complexities. For a longer mixed drink, there's a host of mixer flavours to experiment with. Scotch whisky and cola is popular in nightclubs across Spain. And Scotch whisky with apple juice, lemonade, or ginger ale with ice and a slice of lemon are refreshing alternatives at any time. If you really want to party, then the cocktail possibilities are endless. And don't forget, Scotch whisky straight is a great experience. The range of characters, from subtle to smoky, mean that there is a Scotch for every palate. Scotch whisky is so much more than just a spirits drink. Relish in its heritage. Be confident of its quality. Enjoy the subtlety that 500 years' experience brings. Why not taste the spirit of Scotland? Scotch whisky, the international spirit of choice.